So good to have your company on a Worship Wednesday, and we're blessed every Wednesday to have the company of Reverend Frank Ritchie, who joins us right now. Thanks for hanging out, Rev.
A pleasure.
Okay, we're going to switch and pivot a little bit and go straight to baptisms. With Easter fast approaching, a lot of people may be getting ready to get baptized, actually.
Yeah, we've got our church camp happening this weekend. We've got some people getting baptized there. And a lot of people, think about this and maybe do it over Easter, kind of a traditional thing for some people to do. What about getting baptized twice, though, Frank? Like if you were baptized as a kid in some sort of form or way, and you're like, well, I didn't really know much about it then, or I didn't even have a say in it. Am I already baptized? Can I do it again? Or what about for people that maybe were baptized into their faith at one point in their life and then have gone on a bit of a journey, maybe walked away and then have found God again later on and want to somehow, I don't know, signify that or do something to mark that? What's the rules around baptizing twice?
Give us the road code. Give us the road code.
Yeah, it's actually it's a somewhat complicated question because of the different understandings of what baptism is and different rituals and traditions in various parts of Christendom. So there is no way I can answer this question without part of the community, no matter how I answer it, going, "No, you got it wrong." But I just want to say your picking of putting this alongside Easter is really good because in tradition, old times, Resurrection Sunday, before the sun would come up, would be when people would get baptized. And then Lent was kind of their period of getting ready for their baptism. And there was something significant that would take place at the baptism. That's the reciting of the Apostles' Creed. So the person who was getting baptized would recite it. The congregation would recite it back to them. And it's seen as a symbol of unity, which says something about what the nature of baptism is, I think. Baptism, in my mind, my understanding, and from what I understand about church history for the last 2,000 years, is the baptism of initiation. It's the sacrament of welcoming us into the community. And the ancient Nicene Creed, which goes back to the earliest days of the church, says a line, and it gets translated in various ways, but probably the easiest way to translate it is, we believe in one baptism for the remission or the forgiveness of sins. Now, it's an interesting question to ask me because I've been baptized heaps of times. I got baptized as a baby. My parents weren't Christians, but they took me to the local Anglican church and they baptized me. I got baptized when I was in the Church of Jesus Christ, the Latter-day Saints, when I was in intermediate. And then I got baptized for a bunch of dead people when I was part of that faith as well. And then when I came back to a Christian, kind of more mainline Christian understanding, I got baptized again in what was then an apostolic church. Now, if you asked me now, I would say that the baptism that I recognize now as the baptism was the one my parents had done for me when I was a baby in the Anglican church. That was the sacrament of welcome into the community. Now, later on in my faith, I needed a way of saying publicly, I take this seriously for myself. So in churches that baptize babies, they have confirmation later, where you go through a public ritual to declare your faith. So I would say partly depends on whether you recognize infant baptism or not. If you don't, you're probably going to do an adult baptism at some point. And there was a period in the Reformation where people were killed for doing that. So there's an element where I would protect people's ability to do that because of that little bit of history, though I would recognize the infant baptism. If you've got baptized as an adult and then you've walked away and you've come back, the first baptism in my mind is the valid baptism. Now, you might get dunked again, but essentially it's the same as a confirmation in my mind. But I would say find some sort of public ritual that you can go through that reaffirms your faith. But I would say that first baptism is the one that I would recognize.
Man, that's interesting because I was brought up Catholic, right? Staunch Catholic parents. And
Yeah.
I was baptized as a baby. And then I did the confirmation process as a teenager. But things change from being a teenager to where I'm at now, right?
Totally.
Right,
Now,
so-
if you were still in a liturgical tradition,
Yeah.
you would have a prayer of confession that would happen every week. You would go forward for Holy Communion every week, or you go forward for the Mass. And so there's an opportunity in those liturgical traditions to then, if you've walked away again and then you come back again and you want to validate your faith, you've got that prayer of confession that happens every time. And a Protestant church would be the sinner's prayer, but that only happens every now and then. It happens when you make your kind of declaration. But in older traditions, it happens all the time. And then you'd go forward to receive Jesus in unity with everybody else. So if you're in those liturgical traditions, then some of that stuff that you would be wanting to do to kind of reaffirm your faith if you've been away for a while is happening every single Sunday. And so if you're in a Protestant church, you just need to find ways to do that again.
Yep, we started off asking the question, and we still need to ask the question.
So I guess it depends.
Yeah, it depends.
It depends. Yeah, well, that's cool. It's great hearing the history and some insight on that. And I know what you said, Frank, about how, you got very different beliefs and ideas about this kind of stuff throughout the church anyway. So it's kind of hard to answer as a authority on like this is how it works because different people think differently.
I would say if you're going back time and time again to get baptized as you move from church to church to church, ask what's going on deep inside and see if you can find another way to answer that question, because the sacrament of welcome has happened for you. You are part of the community. You don't need to keep reaffirming that. You need to find other ways to answer those questions that are going on deep inside.
That's a great call, because there's been a lot of walking in and out through this conversation. I appreciate you again, as always, Frank. Thanks for taking time to chat with us. We'll see you next Wednesday.
It's mutual.
We'll see you next Wednesday.
Yeah, see you.
Fix your camera too, by the way.
I will.